In the last video, we have discussed about some of the special files present in nextjs, and we have also discussed about basics of routing in nextjs. The special files we have discussed in the last video was layout, page loading not found, error, global error, and route. So in this video, let's talk about template files. Template file is also very similar to layout file in a sense that it also wraps around its children. The difference between template file and layout file is that template file always gets re-rendered whenever we try to access a component that is part of that template file. So let's try to understand this with the help of an example. Inside of the project, inside of the app directory, I will create a new folder called about. Inside of this about folder, I will create two more folders, me and then another folder called team, and let's make these route publicly accessible by adding a page.tsx file to these folders. This file will return simple JSX. This is the team page, and then we can do the same for me page. So now if you try to access these route, we can see that we are able to access these routes, team page, and similarly for the me page. Let's create another file called template.tsx inside of this about folder. Now, since this file is very similar to layout file, this file also has access to a prop called children. We can get that prop from here, and we also need to pass children like this. Let's also add an h2 or something so that we can understand what is coming from the template and what is coming from those children's. Now, if all goes well, whenever we try to access the team page or me page, we should see this heading also, because this UI that we have present in the template will be shared with this current segment and all of its children. And you can see we are in the me page right now, and you can see this is coming from the about template. And this should also appear whenever you try to access the team page. Now, in order to understand the difference between the template and layout file, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be converting this template file to a client component, because I want to log to the console when these components are getting re-rendered. I will use a use effect, and I will simply log to the console whenever this component gets mounted, right? Okay. So if I just refresh this page, you will notice we are getting about template mounted. And the reason we are getting this 2 times because we are running the application in the development mode. That is just irrelevant. We do not have to focus on that. The important thing is that we are getting this message in the console. Let's try creating another file called layout.tsx in the about folder only. Now the content of this layout file is exactly going to be like this template file. We'll simply rename these. Okay. So now when I try to access the team page, you will see that we are getting both of the logs, about template mounted, about layout mounted. And if I try to access the me page, we are still getting both these logs. Okay, but what is the difference then? In order to see the difference, we'll have to do a soft navigation. What I mean by soft navigation is that we need to create a link. Whenever a user click on that link, we go to a different page. That is when we see the real difference between this layout and template file. So inside of this me page, I can add a link to this. Go to team page, and let's also import link. Okay, I can save this. Now let's try going to a me page. So right now we are in the me page. Let me clear all of the logs. Now notice what happens when I click on this button, go to team page. So when I do that, you will notice that we are only getting the console from the template file. This time we are not getting the console from the layout file. And the reason for that is because template file is the one which gets re-rendered whenever we try to access any component that is part of that template file, right? Now this is useful in those scenarios. For example, let's say you want to track the number of page views, right? So for example, in those cases, inside of this template file, we can create a use effect or something. And whenever any of its children, any of the pages gets loaded, that is part of this template, we will run all of this logic from the beginning, right? Because this whole template component will be re-rendered. And when this gets re-rendered, all of its children will be re-rendered. A new instance will be allotted to all of those children's. And because of that, we will lose the state for all of the client components that is part of this template file. So inside of this template, what we can do, we can probably add a little bit of page tracker. That means whenever any page loads, this component will be re-rendered. And in that case, we'll try to make a request to probably in the backend to store the number of views we got so far, or simply just increment the number of views at this point, right? This template gets re-rendered every time you try to access any of its children. This is not very good for performance related reasons, because every time the whole component is being re-rendered. So that is why you should only use for these kind of scenario. For example, if you want to include this piece of code at one single place and want to execute this logic every time any of the page gets loaded, so that you can track the number of page views, in that case you can use something like template. Or another example could be for all those scenarios in which you want that whenever the navigation happens, a fresh instance of the component should be created, or a fresh state of the component should be created. So in all of those scenarios, the template is the perfect choice for those things. So this is all about the template file. In the next video, we'll be discussing about parallel routes and the default file.